Hey everyone, welcome to Pianist Academy. I'm Charles Szczepanek. It's good to see many friends here this fine morning. Noteworthy Becky, hello, greetings, and Sinden, glad to see you. C Drive, welcome C Drive, and Jess, Rhodsey, always good to see you here. Newt Boy, welcome. And Antonio, I didn't forget your question this time, Antonio. We're going to cover it in between two of the musical examples we'll talk about today. OCD King, hello OCD King. Bedlington Groomer, hello. You say the Tour de France stage finished just in time. Good. I haven't caught any of the tour this year, so sometimes I try to catch a little bit. Does anybody else here watch the Tour de France? And B Booker, hello. And you have your coffee. I have my coffee as well. I just got a refill. Just in time to get started today. And Terry, good morning, Terry. And June, welcome, everybody. Seems like we don't have any other Tour de France watchers. What about you, Rhodsey? Hello, is it Prashant? Or did I say that right? Hello. Benedict Groomer says, tomorrow is a great mountain stage on the tour. I'll see if I can catch it. Oh, okay. Becky says, Lance Armstrong ruined it for you. Well, yeah. Nancy, hello from San Diego. Great to see you. Okay. Well, why don't we jump into what we've got going on today? Rhodsey, this is, okay. What did you just say? You said you were just talking to your local church organist, and you should learn some Catholic hymns for Sunday Mass. Great. Talk to me about that too. Maybe when we get to your composition that we're going to share later on, we can have a quick discussion about that as well. Let's jump in. So the first thing we're going to tackle today is a couple short excerpts that Sinden sent in from Mozart's Fantasie K397. It's the Fantasie in D minor. Beautiful piece. Lots and lots of colors and variation and really cool stuff going on. We're just going to look at, yes, Prashant. Yes, great. Well, welcome. I'm glad to say I haven't seen you tune in before, so welcome. So in this Mozart, we're just going to look at two specific bars, and so they'll be very quick to look through, maybe not as quick to talk through. But let me get that queued up, and we'll take a listen and watch to Sinden playing those, and then talk through those with the music. Okay, I told you it would be short. Good. You know what? Even though it's not a performance, let's just give Sinden some encouragement with a little applause. It always takes guts to send anything in, so thank you for doing that, Sinden. And first of all, congratulations that you're playing this from memory. So you've been working on it quite a bit, probably. Are you preparing the entire piece? What is your goal? What's your goal with playing this piece? Did your teacher give it to you? I think in your last email you said you feel like it's maybe too challenging. So fill us in a little bit about that. And Bethany, welcome, Bethany. Take a look at all that encouragement in the chat. Wonderful stuff. We'll give Sinden a chance to answer that. And while she's, you said yes, the entire piece. Yes, before you were ready for it. Too many moving parts. Okay. We're going to talk a bit about some ways to practice it. If you hear performances of these two bars, they're labeled presto in the score. Let Let me just show you that. So there's the first measure that we're looking at. And the second one is top of the next page. Okay. Quite a few notes. And if you hear performances of this, a lot of pianists just rip through this bar incredibly fast. Noteworthy says, you can't clap on a PC, but yay. Okay, great. So, Sinden, are you open to potentially changing some fingerings? If it's really well practiced in, we don't have to, because the next step I'd like to talk about is going to help alleviate some of the problem. But you say yes. Okay, great. Let's look at measure 34. I took some time actually and wrote in 2 different options. I didn't do this while you were just playing that. You say you used Henley, and I'm take it you followed the Henley fingering then? Do you know who the editor was for that? If you've got a paper copy, right, you can look either on the front cover or right on the title page. But 2 different options for you I have on the screen right now. One option is above, beginning with 3. You say no about the editor. Okay. Just if it's Hans Martin Theopold, throw them out. Use your own. Come up with your own. You're better off doing that than following what he wrote in his Henley editions. So if we follow the top line, we start with 3-5, and then we follow down to 1, cross to 2, 1, 2, 4. And where I've drawn these vertical slashes, that is where we have a pattern that repeats. You've probably already identified that. So I only wrote the fingering in for the first pattern, and then where it's slightly different in the second pattern, right at the beginning. And then at the very end of it, we have a small little change there. Okay. Rhodsey, you say, just wondering, do publishers make these scores look so nice? Was that a how? Do they make them look so nice? Yeah, Rhodsey, give me a little more info about that, and we can chat about it. So, Sinden, the second fingering option is the one I wrote below that begins with 2 and 4. I can't tell on your video. I have a still image pulled up that I'm looking at right now. I can't tell if you're using the 4th finger or the 3rd finger on the high C, that pitch. If you're using the 3rd finger, that's the big thing I'm trying to steer you away from, is that we don't want to go from 2 to 3, if that happens to be something you're doing. 4 or use 3-5. Going through the bottom fingering choice. So 2-4, again, follow it down to 1. That means we get to the end of the hand sooner. We cross to 3. So again, I'm following the numbers on the lower, below the pitches this time. 2-4, 3-2-1, 3-2-1, and then 2-4-1-4. And then we're repeating the pattern. You could do the same thing. I didn't write it at the after the very last vertical slash, but you'd continue the same pattern. You say you're using 4th finger. Okay, great. If your fingering lines up with this second one, then great, don't change anything about it. Okay? The second thing let's talk about with this passage, this is going to apply to both passages, by the way. We'll go through fingering for the second one in just a second. I'm going to show back on screen this still image that I'm sitting on. Cool, great, I'm glad. Okay, wonderful that the second choice looks like the fingering that you're working with. Great, okay. Hello, Lisa. Okay, so I'm going to switch back to a still shot of you, Sinden. And take a look at the position of your hand and all of your fingers. Just to be helpful to everyone who's here. what are we seeing? And Sinden, please chime in too, of course. What are we seeing that needs to be better about the position the hand is in currently? And Sinden, if you haven't reviewed or like really analyzed this video yourself, is a great opportunity. You say fifth finger flies. Newt boy, the pinky, fifth finger. Okay, you're many of you. So Lisa, Newt boy, Sinden. You're cueing into the fifth finger, but yes, Bedlington Groomer, you said more relaxation in fingers. SP, you said flying fingers, because if we look. It's very hard to see if that's the second finger playing. I think it's the second. I think that's the very first note of the run. And all the position of all of the other fingers in the hand. You say you have arthritis in which finger? SP, you're jumping the gun, but you're doing great. Sinden, which finger do you have arthritis in? Pinky, okay. The pinky it tends to fly away for lots of people. It's not truly a problem if the hand is relaxed at the point of playing each individual pitch. Let's talk about that a bit more. So if we come back and I kind of demo that hand position that you're showing, you're playing with two, but everything else is kind of up like this. We're looking at it from the opposite side when I show you. This, holding the hands here, holding all the fingers away from the keys is a lot. This is putting a lot of tension into the system, which means while two is playing, everything else is lifting away. And that is working the tendons and the muscles in opposite directions. They're conflicting with one another. That is the biggest reason you're having trouble with articulation as you play through the phrases, meaning some of the notes feel like they maybe skip forward in time a little bit, and some of them are a little slower. It's probably a reason why, if you're having trouble speeding the tempo up of this with a lot of practice, it's not getting faster. Yeah, and it might even also cause difficulty in switching hand position, because right on that first pitch, and this continues as you play the whole passage, you switch to another finger, and then two lifts. Jess said, gee, that looks familiar. Lots of people struggle with this. So Sinden, you're not alone. The best thing you can do to practice this is the most tedious, but it's truly going to be the best, not just for this passage, but for everything else that you're going to play. When you strike a single pitch, take enough time before you play the next one. Take enough time that if the fingers go flying, you say, I can relax them and let them rest on the keys, just like what SP said a little bit ago. So we want to promote all of the fingers that are not being used being inactive, right? Actually, truly not being used, and not pulling the hand in the opposite direction. Ideally, we want that relaxation to happen across every strike of every pitch. So as I go through this slowly, notice how none of the fingers are flying away as I go. And I'm taking a nice, slow tempo to make sure that doesn't happen. Because I haven't practiced this run, if I try and speed it up, I begin to accidentally incorporate some lifting. Yeah? So if I were learning this as well, my focus would be on completely making sure that the four fingers that are not playing are completely disengaged from the process. Only that one that's active at a time. And I said go very, very slowly. I don't think you can overestimate how slow the tempo can be. Because if it takes 3 seconds to get those fingers to relax, take those 3 seconds and get them to relax for every pitch. And as you start to feel that, that time is going to get shorter and shorter. But try to make sure, this is the tedious part, you don't allow yourself to play the next note in the run until the hand's relaxed. Because we always want to approach that next note from the point of relaxation. That's what we want to build. Hey there, piano seeker. That's by far the most important part. Transcending fingering choices, you can get through some remarkably bad fingering choices if you play from that point of relaxation. So don't allow yourself to move to the next pitch until everything in the hand is totally relaxed. And then sometimes, let's say, does it ever happen in this example? I don't think it does, actually. No, it doesn't. There might be occasion... you know what? I won't bring it up. Maybe it'll happen in the next example. And then we can talk about it in context. Okay, Sinden, that sounds good. So that's the first thing. Soft dynamic, I didn't mention that. So play at piano. There's no stress to play louder. By stress, I don't mean like emotional, just physical strain. A very relaxed dynamic, piano, mezzo piano, whatever's comfortable. And that sensation of having the fingers on the key surface is your physical indication, your clue that when that happens, you can move on to the next pitch. Yeah, Jess, you say relaxation, harder than it sounds. And Newt Boy, this is arguably the most important habit to internalize. Yeah. Because no matter where we go, and even the next steps that we're going to add from here, we want to play them from this perspective. We always want to come back to this. This is foundational, you could say. Yeah. Oh, good, piano seeker. Yes. Okay, let's move forward to a couple other practice techniques. I wouldn't be in a rush to get to these, but once you feel like you have found this place, at least you can get to more of a sense of relaxation. We can move to some further things. Let's talk about a little bit of rotation. Whenever we don't have, especially when we don't have a linear passage with sequential fingers, when we're skipping a finger, we can always incorporate a little rotation. So right at the beginning of the passage from 2 to 4, you could always play that with a little rotation toward the 4th finger. And then again when we change, rotation, rotation. And incorporating that, right? It's most apparent in the wrist, but it's forearm rotation. This doesn't take the place of what we just talked about with the relaxation. You can still see, even as I'm adding the rotation in, even though fingers are now lifted off the key, if I show you from the top as well, you can see that 1 and 2 and 3 are not touching the keys anymore. But it's not because they're being held up. It's because the forearm has rotated them away. Yum. So look for those skips in finger. You say you're currently working on rotation using Hannon. Do you have the Hannon Faber book, Sinden? And is that how you're working on it? Well, explain that a little bit more. Yeah, Rhodsey, this is like a mini cadenza in Mozart. Yeah, both of these. I'd call them mini cadenzas. I'm just giving Sinden a chance to tell us a little bit about how she's using Hannon to work on rotation. Okay. I don't know that book, Jailbreaking Hannon. I'm not familiar with that one. SP, great. Hannon Faber, wonderful. Oh, and thanks, Rhodsey. Pianist Academy mug. You can just see my little... Yeah, it's right on there. Newt Boy, Hannon Faber rocks. Yes. So Sinden, if you don't have the Hannon Faber book, at least take a look at it. You know what? Take a look at the videos I have on the channel, because I have one about how the first pages in that book and how they cover rotation in particular. Oh, thanks, Nancy. I don't know, and if the jailbreaking Hannon book is very similar, then don't go out and get the Hannon Faber one if it's doing the same thing for you. But if you see that it's different, because my video on rotation is some 40 minutes long. It's about 20 minutes of explanation and 20 minutes of demonstration. So you don't need to listen to all the demonstration. Jess, no, I don't sell these, Jess. Not yet. It's solo merch. Okay, Graham Fitch did a video on jailbreaking Hannon. Okay. He's usually very good, so I usually like his stuff a lot. Great. Take a look at those, and then, yeah, we can keep incorporating rotation via those exercises. But know that in this passage that we're working on, whenever we have a skip in fingers, that's a great opportunity to employ that, whether you're playing 2 to 4, 3, 5, 2, 4, 1, 5. Yeah. Okay. Next thing. Let's talk about groupings. This is something I think, Sinden, that you realized on the last stream when we were talking about the list cadenza, something that would help you out. Let's go through dividing this into some groupings for practice, this particular passage. Let's see, we'll put them in a different color. When you're not working on rotation, I would leave that. So now the blue is showing practice groupings. The red slashes are showing compositional groupings. Yeah. If you're not working on rotation and just working on a part of a passage, I might separate that first note out. And then, you can probably do this already. Let's see. Let's go to there. That'll be one grouping. I'm using the bottom fingers since those are the ones you're most familiar with. So, then in this quasi scale, can you speed that up? Great. Then let's do... We're going to do a grouping that overlaps, starting with the C sharp and going to C natural. So that'll really get you working on the rotation. And then another grouping that overlaps. And then we'll repeat. So I think this is one possible practice grouping for you. You say the most awkward in the first run are the notes C sharp, E, A, and C. C sharp, E, A. Oh, the turnaround. C sharp, E, A, C natural. Yes. So that's part of the reason why we have two groupings that overlap on some of those notes. Because when we play from the first one, from the fourth finger down to here, the primary thing that grouping is working on is the cross to 3, and then the cross... Oh, no. We're not going to the bottom line. We're going to the line after that. So we're working on the cross to 3, and we're working on the cross to 2. That's what that grouping is working on. Right? The second grouping, if we get rid of all of that, is working the rotation. Da-da-da-dum. And you can feel free to even do a little bit of repetition of each grouping. Yeah. I like to say no more than 3 repetitions doing anything the same way. So I just did 3, the same speed, the same dynamic. Then it would be time to move on. Oh, Carmi, you say you can always play this with 2 hands. You can. I'm not sure if that would actually be easier. Let's work through. Let me finish working through this, and then we'll tackle a little bit of maybe possibly how to divide it into 2 hands. You have to divide the arpeggio up that's not on the screen into 2 hands for sure. And Sinden, you say you want 1 hand. Okay. Okay, so we have a grouping that works on this finger crosses. The second grouping, like I was mentioning, is working on rotation. You can do a couple repetitions, and then we repeat. Okay. That is not the only possible way of grouping this, though. Another way would be to follow the pattern that's actually given on the page. So let's keep with your fingers. So ending where I've drawn the red slash this time. And now that would be a second step, right? Because we're incorporating a couple things that were left out in the previous groups. I like to say challenge yourself when you're playing groups. Hello, Catherine. When you're playing these groupings, challenge yourself with the tempo. The reason that we're condensing this down is to say this is a much more manageable chunk. We're working on 1 or 2 really specific things. Take that opportunity before we have to play the entire run to speed up these little bits. So they might not today be as fast as what I'm showing you, but challenge yourself to the point where you play everything correctly and the gestures are good. So that means the relaxation of the fingers, the rotation of the forearm, if you want that, right? Okay, so we want to be aware of all of those things and accomplish all of those at the fastest speed that we can. That's the benefit of doing these in small groups. Okay, yeah, you say absolutely. Let's talk about one more thing with groupings, not groupings, one more practice tip for this, and then I'll do a quick little dive into dividing this into 2 hands. I know, Sinden, you said you don't want that, but the solution that I can see quickly, I'll show that to everybody. Sinden, where you notice that you have sticky notes in the passage, or notes that are, they become overly legato, or notes that we have trouble articulating. So those might be after a finger cross, especially if we're not using rotation here yet, and we're not used to the change in direction in the middle of that phrase. We might get some notes that are, I call them sticky or gluey, or the articulation isn't clean and it's not clear, right? There's probably also a problem with our gesture in there too. But something you can do to help break that up is to say, start with, if you can identify the single note that's causing the most problem. You say mostly starting at the C sharp. So let's take that one, for example. So starting at the C sharp, when we get to the C sharp, give it a really big accent. We want to reset what the hand is doing on that note. So what would be great is through those 4 notes that give you this problem, from C sharp to C natural, practice going through and giving each of them an accent and the time it takes to make that accent. So practice that a few times. Then switch and say, I'm going to work on accenting the E, the second note of those 4. notice how this also creates a quasi group for us because the accent takes time and we're not rushing through the passage. We're just trying to reset the hand during these tricky spots. Lisa, sounds like you have a good teacher. So we would continue what we're doing. We accented the C sharp and then the E, and then we'll accent the A. That one is not going to need much practice. It's a thumb. You might not want to spend actually any time doing that. Because we don't really need to worry about the thumb being a strong finger. It's probably the movement to 4 that's our problem. So let's skip over accenting thumb and go back now to C natural, which would be the 4th note in this little blue section. Yep. Notice we're not doing it at the beginning, right? The beginning doesn't pose the same challenge as it does, as we have in the middle of the passage. The challenge is there after we've played an octave plus. The E. Go back to the C sharp. Yep. Sinden, all making sense? I love using, personally, I do this all the time in my own practice. I love using groupings and accents in passages like this. As long as you can isolate and you know where that finger is that's causing the biggest problem. Today, it might be one of them in particular. And tomorrow, or the next day, there might be another one that creeps in. So that means how we move our accented practice around, it could change every single day. And that's probably a good thing because as we bring, this note, let's say we have, I don't know how many notes this passage has, 50, just to estimate. So we have 50 pitches. Some of them we're playing very well. We'll say our level is up here, right? And some of them, it's down here. And we know if we just go through and we practice the entire passage and we do it the same way, what's going to happen is the discrepancy between what's good already and what's not as good, it just all gets better, but the discrepancy still exists. And so we want to focus on the stuff that's not as good, right? And I'm not dropping it way down because you're already playing it. You're playing it cohesively as a passage. We don't have anything that's just there's no train wreck. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So we're employing techniques, and when we bring one of those pitches up a little bit, guess what? It's going to expose the next one that needs work. So while we might be distracted by that first one, like you said, the C sharp today, we're very distracted by it, and we say that's the note that needs the most work. As that one gets better and better and better, you're going to come to a point in time where that one doesn't need that type of practice anymore, and a different one in the passage does. All that to say, don't be afraid to change where the groupings are and where the accent is. And it should change based on how you just did it today. So when you sit down and practice again, it's always a clean slate, right? We might have techniques we've developed, and if we do encounter a similar problem, we say we go back to what we did, and it's working. Things are getting a little better, and that's still what I need to do. But the day that you come to practice, and that's no longer a problem, take a minute and be very happy about it, of course. And secondly, then listen for, well, where's the next one, and how does my practice strategy need to shift? Sometimes, just for everybody that's here, sometimes that can shift or needs to shift on a 5-minute by 5-minute basis, or even less, 1 minute by 1 minute through our practice. Sometimes, if something is really a challenge in a specific way for our current technique, it might be days. In both of those cases, we just want to pay attention to when that change in practice strategy needs to happen. Because what we don't want to do is continue like pounding to death that note when it's no longer a problem, because the more repetitions we do of that, the more likely it is that when we want to play the passage musically and with a bigger shape, that's still going to be there, right? So everything in balance, knowing that it can change. B Booker, you say your fingers prefer third finger on C sharp. That is interesting. Let me come back to that. So. The thing that I don't like about that, and B Booker, if you're trying these out as we go, just to see what works for you, that's cool. Love that. The thing that I don't like about using the third finger on C sharp is so if we'd use 3, we'd probably have to use 5 on, because 3 to 4 is a really awkward shape to make. So 3, 5, and then we're going to have to use 1. And then regardless of the choice we go to next, 4 or 5, it feels awkward. If we go to, because to me, I know 1, I used 1 in this example up here, but the hand feels like it's, because we used a lower finger there, it feels like it's still moving in the direction, and it feels like the hand is moving down still. Whereas to me, if we use 3 on C sharp, it feels like we get stuck. And we have to do these 2 rotations, which we still have to do, but the rotations happen, they happen in a way that's, it feels like I can't continue the gesture and the momentum down the keyboard. Now, that's my personal preference. So, and that's why I brought it up. But finger choices, like we have, I think like we've talked about many times here before, there's a lot of personal stuff in choosing good fingerings. So if it really works and you don't have that issue with continuing the gesture, by all means use it. That's the reason why I wouldn't use it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's take a quick look at, before we go there was one more thing I didn't mention. Looking at my notes. And Sinden, I think you're already doing this, but detached practice, not to be confused with staccato practice, but yeah. So if that's also really, really a great thing to do, take a nice slow tempo. Make sure I always encourage articulation from the wrist, and that it's a down motion, not an up motion. And that's why I draw a big distinction between a staccato articulation in practice and a detached articulation in practice. Staccato, we always focus on pulling away from the key. That's going to be not a good thing to practice for this. So we don't want to pull the wrist away, and we don't want to pull the arm away. What we want to do is it almost feels like a lazy release of each key, which guess what? That laziness promotes the relaxation in the fingers too. So yeah. Notice how that's very different than, not just in how it sounds, but also how it looks. That has a lot of pulling away. There, the primary focus is on the drop in. Yeah? So that's another great way to practice this. And you can go through the whole thing. It's really like adding kind of an accent, because if we're throwing from the wrist, every finger is getting a really nice activation, which is really great. Okay, really quickly, just to talk about how you could possibly divide this into 2 hands. The first thing that occurs to me, let's also get rid of what we're looking at, is taking all of this, right hand, and then left hand for those two where the passage turns. Left hand over the top, and then right hand. So I show you what that looks like. Yep. That eliminates all of that need to do any sort of rotation. It's kind of crazy how fast you can play it using two hands to go through there. So, Sinden, I know you're interested in working that one hand to make it really, really a wonderful execution of it. That's great. If Carmi, if you're still here, do you have another? Would you agree with that? Because it sounds like you might have played this before with two hands. Mm-hmm. I'm going to jump to the next page. Carmi, if you feel free to write in. And okay, so Sinden, all of the things that we just worked on, the practice techniques, they all apply to the next passage as well, groupings, etc. See, Carmi, you say right hand, thumb in G. I would have to see that on notation. Thumb in G. Okay. Left hand thumb on F. I think I like mine better. I think I like mine better where if you play the whole passage except the turnaround, and those two notes are with the left hand. That really flies. The other one, I feel like navigating where the right hand is going to go underneath the left hand. And we still have to incorporate a rotation back for that C sharp E. Rotate. But it's it's another thing to experiment with, because it might work wonderfully for some people. So, yeah. Sinden, you say I don't have to go to the next passage. Let me show you the fingers that I came up with for it. And we can move on from there. So I came up with starting a second finger. I don't remember on your video what you did. So 2, 3, 1, 3, 2, 1, 2. And from there, we have a pattern that repeats. And especially, I'll just highlight the rotation from 4 to 3 and to 5 here. That's going to be really, really important to work out. And the rotation between 4 and 3, it's such a small movement, but really integral to keeping this phrase. If you want to play it presto, it'll end up feeling just like a little shake. Yeah. Okay. Hey, Nico. Welcome. Sinden, do you have any follow-up questions? I really appreciate that you sent this in. It's just such a lovely piece. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions. Does anybody have any follow-up questions about what we just talked about? The beginning of the piece. Really, really lovely. And then the adagio. Becky, you say, what level is this piece? If I were to take a guess, I would say, because of the presto passages, RCM level 10. Because of the interpretive needs, yeah, probably RCM level 10. I don't think it would be a diploma level piece. But also playing this, and the end is, it's a little bit more intricate. But playing this really well, I think, would make it quite advanced. Lisa, you know, I like. I'm not really pedaling a lot of the adagio. I'm using a little bit of pedal, but it's mostly finger pedal, or I call it finger sustain. But yes, there's pedal there, so that I'm not going chunk, 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 chunk. I want to connect that inner texture. But I'm making sure that where there is a staccatissimo marked, then I'm still showing all that articulation, so the pedal is never getting in the way of any of that. Yeah. So Sinden, you said rotation is very important, and the beginning is your favorite. Are you going to into Ludo pieces following in the intro? High level, some rated as 9. Okay. Cool. Well, wonderful. You know what? Let's give Sinden another round of applause. Thanks for sending in. We would love to hear you. I'm speaking for everybody, but I'm sure everybody agrees. We would love to hear you play the whole thing. That would be very wonderful. So if you ever feel like sending in a performance of the entire piece, please do. Yeah. And you say the piece is all memorized. Really great. Yeah. So if there aren't any other questions about this piece, and about what we talked about, I'm going to jump to a question that Antonio emailed over. So it's a bit of a change of topic. And then we're going to come back to a musical example. We're going to hear Rhodsey play some of a new composition of his. Yeah, wonderful. Okay. Yeah, Bethany says, would love to hear the whole thing. Yeah. But it was really cool to hone in on that section. Yes, great. Okay, for a totally different topic, Antonio, you were asking about my process in recording when I use a VST, a sample library, and my keyboard. And I think it basically amounted to, do you play on your keyboard first and then run it through a VST? Or vice versa? I'm kind of paraphrasing that, but do you play with the VST already engaged? Yeah. Antonio, did I get your question right? The first part of the question. I know there's a second part. While Antonio's answering that, how many of you here use digital keyboards when you play? How many of you use sample libraries? If you use a digital, I would highly encourage you to also grab a sample library to practice with. It would be such a game changer for your practice. In fact, Antonio says more or less, yeah. In fact, I have an idea for a video for the channel about how we can use MIDI data, which all of you that practice on digitals, you can do this. How we can use MIDI data to better our technique because of the graphic feedback that we get. So more to come on that. Rhodsey says you use a Yamaha P145. A sample library or a VST, a virtual instrument, is a piece of software that runs on your computer and gets the MIDI input from your keyboard. For every digital can export MIDI data. On an older digital, it's going to go through a MIDI connector, which is like a little circular thing, and it's got, I think, 7 pins. You plug that in, and you have to have an adapter from your computer. Or you just plug in USB. That's how most modern keyboards work with modern computers. You just have a USB cable. Rhodsey, you use Pianotech. Pianotech isn't a sample library, but it is a VST. Bethany, I know Bethany uses, you say Kawai Digital plus VSTs, a lot of Pianotech. How does one get a sample library? Bedlington Groomer said. There are tons and tons that are out there. My favorites, I've mentioned them before, but I'll mention them again. My absolute favorite right now is the Modern D by VI Labs. That is a sample of one of the newly designed Steinway Ds built in 2020. And there was a technician on call for the entire sampling session. So the piano is in tip top shape. And it's also a great representation of how Steinway has kind of morphed their instruments into no longer having such a dramatic difference between a Hamburg Steinway and a New York Steinway. And that happened. The D that was sampled for that piece of software was one of the first, I believe, to come out of the factory that was that combination. C drive, you say Pianotech is great for practice because it automatically records everything you play and you can clip the front and the back. That is a really cool feature of Pianotech, that you don't have to actually press record somewhere or even open up another piece of software. B Booker, the cost of VSTs ranges dramatically. Some less, Antonio, you know of one that is completely free. That sounds pretty darn good. It's the Princeton Steinway D. If there's any other information you can drop about that, Antonio, drop it in the chat, please. The Modern D that I just mentioned, I believe, is normally $200, I believe. And it goes on sale, I think, for $150 occasionally here and there. Other libraries, Pianotech is like an a la carte thing. So you can get Pianotech and it's like a basic version, and then you can add instruments to it for more and more cost. I don't know what the base price of new Pianotech is, but I'm guessing it's in the couple $100 range. And then they go way up. And when the price goes up, it doesn't always mean that it's a better product. So VSL, Vienna Symphonic Library, they have a number of piano sample libraries. They have a Yamaha CFX. They've got a Bösendorfer Imperial. They have at least one Steinway D. They have a Fazioli, two Fazioli concert grands. I don't actually think they sound as good or as real as the products by VI Labs, and they cost much more money, like almost $700. You do get a huge amount of microphone position, so you can basically say, here's the piano on this stage, and here's what it sounds like from 20 feet away, and that's a part of their product. But the instrument itself, I don't think, let's just say I'm a big fan of VI Labs because I think they make the most real sounding digital sample libraries. Okay. Antonio says, 100% free. And you said the Bitklavier plus Princeton Steinway library. I've heard a little bit of it, and I can say, especially for a free library, it sounds really good. And it sounds 100 times better than any onboard sound on any keyboard, no matter the price. Yes. So even if you have a digital that you happen to spend $15,000 on, you can still improve it if you have a sample library. Okay, back to Antonio's question. So you were asking, do I record just the MIDI data first and then open up a sample library and have it play back? And I don't do that because every library is its own instrument. So if you take MIDI data that you record for one instrument, whether that's your keyboard and the onboard sounds for your keyboard, or one VST, one library, and you take that MIDI data and you say, I'm going to play it through another product or another sample library. Very often what happens is that the velocity tables for the two different instruments, they don't match up. They do kind of, but not in a very nuanced way. So When you want to show, for example, a big difference between a forte and piano, and what works velocity-wise in one sample library, and what your hands do because you're playing that instrument and your ears are getting that feedback, how you execute it becomes unique to playing on that instrument, just like when we have an acoustic instrument we're sitting in front of. And as soon as you change and you say, I'm going to take that same MIDI data and have it interpreted by a different instrument, all those nuances usually get morphed into something they were never intended to be. So I have never found, and I've tried doing it, I have never found that I've been able to record via one VST and then change my mind later on and say, instead of playing it with the Ravenscroft 275 from VI Labs, this isn't an ad for them. I'm not sponsored. I don't get a kickback. I just really like their products. Instead of, playing that sample library and then saying, well, I'd rather use the Modern D instead, and taking my recording and just plopping the other VST on it, will not sound right. I always have to re-record. So for me, it's really important that I choose the sample library that I'm going to record with when I do the recording, because it affects how I play. And it affects my interpretation, the time I take between notes, the colors that the instrument is capable of. Just like if I had both of those instruments physically sitting in front of me, I would play the same piece of music differently on the two of them. So that's my answer to that, Antonio. And it leads into the second part of your question, which you had sent over a huge list of just a massive number of MIDI files of some classical pieces and jazz pieces recorded by, I think, one person in particular. And you were mention that in the chat if you can, because I do not remember the name. I don't know if it's free or if you purchase them. If it's free, even better. No, Antonio, I haven't updated my favorite libraries. You're right. I really need to do that. I'm sure they'd be happy too if I did that. All this list of MIDI files are basically performances of entire pieces, classical and jazz and some other things. They're even included like some trios or combo groups where you can apply different virtual instruments and have the whole ensemble playing. It's called the Pianist MIDI Library. Thanks, Antonio. And you said 100% free too. Okay. Let me just say this. For being free, it's a phenomenal resource. And you can grab those MIDI files and you can play with the tempo of them. You can see the graphic representation of velocity. You can, yes, play them through your sample library that you have. Yeah, you're welcome, Lisa. And in that sense, they're lovely. But the performances I listened to felt, and I'm going to attribute it to the fact that I don't have the keyboard, nor the velocity table, nor the VST that the person who recorded it played on. They all felt very square, and there just wasn't a lot of the playing wasn't very colorful. So, for example, if I, as a teacher of the classical repertoire, I would not send a student to go listen to those recordings. I would rather a student find something great on YouTube, and if they need to slow it down, get another piece of software that can slow the audio down to hear it. I can't exactly speak about the jazz and everything like that. That was a part of the bundle. They sounded better to me than the classical interpretations, but they still had that sense that everything was kind of in a box and very square. It was clean. It was very clean playing, but you weren't listening to Bill Evans play a sample library. It just didn't. It didn't have that much feeling in the playing. So I think there is a place for it as an educational tool. I wouldn't listen to them necessarily for fun, because it's just, we have access to so much stuff. That's wonderful. You know, you can hear just about any jazz pianist play any standard you want to, just online, usually for free, especially if you're creative. And so because we have access to all of that now, I feel like the educational uses of that library of MIDI files is limited. Yeah. Thanks for being here, B. Booker. So that is my review, Antonio. And still, because of that difference, and I don't have the sample library that the pianist played, I, nor you, nor anybody that downloads those is really hearing what they heard when they played stuff. That actually leads me to two other side tangents that we'll go through quickly. Newt Boy's question, noteworthy. Oh, yeah. Okay, well, Newt Boy, I'll answer this question, and then I'll try to remember my side tangents. You said, what digital action is the best and closest to acoustic, in my opinion? Kawai does have a wooden action. Yes, the stage models and even above that. I believe a lot of digitals these days have wooden actions, actually, especially the higher end ones. Nord also has a wooden action. The last time, I've always preferred Kawai. We'll throw that out there. But I'm also playing on a very old instrument. It's about a 15-year-old MP8 Mark II. So, and the beautiful thing about sample libraries is when the onboard sounds really sound bad because they're that old, doesn't matter because I never use them. It's just MIDI data, which is extremely efficient and tiny. So even those old keyboards can still send MIDI data wonderfully. The keyboard doesn't have double escapement. It doesn't have other things. I wish it did, but I don't want to drop $5,000 on a new keyboard. Okay. I really like Kawai actions on digitals. And Nord also uses the Kawai, their high-end action, in their keyboards as well. And to me, that's a signal that if Nord, that's trying to make really the premier stage piano product, they didn't choose to develop their own, and they didn't choose a different company. They chose Kawai, and they're using that technology. So I'm a big fan of it for those reasons. I've played Decibel at trade shows, and it's a little hard to tell because those environments are really loud. So you're always on headphones, and it's... That said, my opinion was also very high of the products from Decibel. That's DEXIBELL, one word. And those are made in Italy. I don't know much about the onboard sounds on them, but the action felt really good. And so if I was in the market to buy a new keyboard, it would really be between those three brands: Kawai, Nord, and Decibel for me. I've never liked Roland personally. I've never liked Yamaha personally. There are lots of people that do. Lots of very fine pianists that do. I don't think that they feel like the acoustic instruments I play. Whereas this piano and my keyboard are extremely similar. Even though the action in here, my Kawai, is no longer a Kawai action at all. It still feels very similar. Hello, Kale. Oh, interesting, Antonio. I didn't know about Decibel having their own VST. Yeah, Newt Boy, I'd agree. Kawai is a really, really good brand. And to be fair to Yamaha, I think that their keyboards feel like their new CFX 2.0, the Concert Grand. And when I played the redesign of the CFX, I actually didn't like it at all. And It's not an inferior product. It's just a personal preference. So, yeah, it's always great if you can go and try those things out. Just like if you were going to spend so much money on a piano, you'd never just buy one on the internet and have it shipped to you. You'd always go and try it out. And I think we should always try to do the same thing if we are going to buy a digital instrument. If you can go, I know this doesn't happen like it used to, but if you can go to a store that has 10 that you can actually play, that's still the best thing. Yeah. And Nico says, you can't wait to finally have space for an acoustic piano. It'll be a glorious day when that happens. Yeah. That's a fun thing to look forward to. Okay, my two quick tangents. Back on Antonio's question, then we're going to jump to Rhodsey playing. And they have to do with the player piano systems that are on a variety of instruments these days. So player piano systems basically use MIDI data. We're talking about Disc Clavier by Yamaha, Piano Disc, which is its own company owned by Mason Hamlin, and Spirio by Steinway. I think those are the three big players. We'll just say it's like MIDI on steroids because it's a very similar data feed and data stream, but there's a lot more data points that are captured. When I have recorded, I have about 40 pieces of mine, either originals or arrangements, on the Piano Disc platform that people that own the system can purchase, and they can hear me playing their acoustic piano wherever they are. When I did those, I recorded MIDI data at home. So I just used my digital with a sample library. But when they got the data from me, they had to make sure that it was going to play correctly on their system. And so I included an audio performance of the recording to say, this is, regardless of how the data is initially interpreted, this is what it should sound like. So when you plug it in to a different system that it wasn't recorded on, and it's maybe all over the place, you have a reference for what it should sound like. The thing that has really blown me away, another thing that's really blown me away about Spirio with Steinway, is when I heard the demo of it, the demo pieces were obviously not recorded on the piano that was in the gallery. They were recorded usually on concert grands somewhere else. But the quality of the interpretation of that data on the acoustic piano that was in the showroom was phenomenal. It didn't have any of the things that I hear when I say, oh, this data is being misinterpreted. Like, it's not coming across the right way. It's not coming across the way the performer intended it to. I don't know what is underneath the hood of the Spirio technology that allows that to happen, but the performances I heard translated so well. It was incredible. I suppose it should for how expensive it is. But it was still, even knowing that, it was surprising in person to hear it and not hear or feel like there was any nuance or compromise at all in the playback, even though the instrument was totally different. Those are my two tangents. C-Drive, you said, surprisingly, apparently, a lot of people do buy acoustic pianos online without ever having played them. Oh, my goodness. I would never do that. That just seems like a horrible way to spend a lot of money. Antonio, you said Bechstein has a piano player system too. Oh, interesting. Nico, you heard a Spirio play Horowitz's live recording of Traumerei, and it was breathtaking. Yeah. And Becky, you said incredibly expensive. Yes. Yeah. I don't know. I know, Becky, you have two Steinways at home. Have you looked into getting a Spirio installed on them? And can they be installed on... Can Steinway come and install it on an older instrument? If you happen to know, I'd love to know that. Because I don't know if it's only on their newer models, if there's been a redesign in geometry and such, or if they will outfit any Steinway of any generation with that system. And Bedlington, you say you bought your Yamaha online with no testing, but it was during the COVID lockdown, and it was before we met. Yes. Oh, good. So, when it's something you're going to sit with and live with, and it's a little different. If you're a complete beginner and you've never played anything before, and you want to get started playing, and you say, I need a keyboard. Well, trying out a bunch at a store is not really going to be all that helpful if you don't have someone to go with you that is more skilled and has spent more time playing. And from that perspective, yeah, sure, buy something online and get started, and don't let the process of research hold you back. And as long as it has pretty good weighted keys, you're going to be in good shape to get going. And then as you develop as a pianist, and let's say you've exited beginner level and you're playing intermediate repertoire, you're going to start to feel, especially if you have opportunities to play different instruments, you're going to start to feel like, oh, there are certain things that I can do more easily on one type of piano or keyboard than I can do on another one. And then you'll know what those are, and you'll be getting feedback about that. Then it becomes more important to say, well, I really want to choose what fits me really well. And those tastes can change too. For example, when I was a teenage student, I hated really fast actions on pianos. I hated feeling like the piano, it was going to run away from me as I played it. I really disliked that. I felt like I couldn't control things. And it was interesting. So when this piano was new, it had kind of a heavy action. And I really liked that. And then I'd go and play a Steinway B at my lessons, and it had a very heavy action. And I kind of liked that. And then I'd go into the performance space, and they had a Steinway D in that space, and it had this super light action, and it was like nothing I was used to playing at all. And it always threw me off. Anyway, really disliked that. And over years of study and years of playing, I started transitioning in the other direction, to the point where now this piano is extremely fast and light feeling. I think it is, especially compared to older Steinways. It's very quick. When one of my teachers was Robert Hamilton, and there is a recording of him performing on this piano on the channel. I put it out last week, I think. If you haven't heard that, go check that out. He plays Poulenc for 6 or 8 minutes here. And we have one video where we were talking that's already out about Chopin, and there's another one coming out next week. Anyway, when he was here, he had the same comment. He has an old 1900 Steinway B at home that's on its 3rd rebuild. And he came here and sat down, and he said, wow, this piano is super light. And so my tastes changed, and over time, I had this instrument modified to accommodate that. And guess what? I'm at the point again in my life where my taste is changing, and I'm kind of tired of how light this instrument plays. And I would like something that I have to work harder to play forte, but I don't have to work as hard to make beautiful shapes and phrases. So that'll be the next step, whatever that happens to be. Yes, Carly, you say you will know what piano you gravitate towards. You won't touch a Roland as far as you can throw it. IBL, I think that is. You say, how much do you have to maintain the piano, and any tips on that? And yes, I'll come back to that. Rhodsey, you said, you know what else is rare and expensive? Those pianos with more than 88 keys, like Bosendorfer. Yeah, yeah. IBL. How much do you have to? How often do you have to maintain a piano? And any tips? It's really a good idea to have your piano, your acoustic tuned at least twice a year. And if you can do it right after the season changes, if you're in a place that has seasonal changes like that, big ones. Or, for example, if you're when you switch, for example, from using air conditioning to furnace or heat, and the humidity in the space, usually when you switch, the humidity in the space fluctuates a lot. Also, those times a year, the humidity in the outdoor environment fluctuates a lot. And it seems like no matter how regulated the space that the piano is in is kept, it's those points, those changes in season, where the biggest shifts in tuning and in regulation happen for acoustic instruments. So if you're only going to have an acoustic tune twice a year, I would say you should never have it tuned less than twice a year. You're asking for bigger problems to occur that are going to be really expensive to fix later. So twice a year after the seasonal shift. And if you can, have it tuned more often than that. What I do is a little extreme for a home piano, but that's because I record on it a lot. So I have this piano tuned probably 6 to 8 times a year in time for every recording project I'm doing. And so it's never really far out of tune. And this past year, I had my entire action replaced with carbon fiber action. So it needs extremely little regulation. That doesn't fluctuate. The material itself doesn't fluctuate with temperature and humidity and change. If you do have a traditional wood action, it's typical that you should get some regulation work done about every 5 years. It's usually not an extreme thing, but it'll be like pedal regulation, a let off on the keys, maybe some strike point adjustments, repetition springs, unless there's a problem that's sticking out, and you can have individual keys, taken care of when your tuner comes. If you say this one is double striking, well, just have them take care of that when they're out. But about every 5 years, do a more major regulation of the instrument if it's just a practice piano at home. And after that, it gets a little complicated after that, because the rules about how often you should get certain work done are very different amounts of time depending on how hard you play and how often you play. So like the usual lifespan of a piano is about 30 years without needing a rebuild. Less than that if you practice heavily, like 10 to 15 years if you practice really, really heavily. So practice pianos at universities that are played 8 hours a day plus, those need extensive work done every 5 to 10 years. Yeah. But if you don't play a ton, like some people have pianos that are new, and they might be 30 years old, and if they were minimally played, as long as they were maintained, if they were minimally played, the components have next to no wear on them, and you'll get another 20 years out of the instrument. So it really depends on how often you play and how much force you're putting through everything. Because the more force you put through the hammer, the more the hammer changes shape, the more often, and so the more notes you're playing, the more advanced your repertoire is, the more often all of the felt that's inside the action is getting compressed, and the geometry is changing in really subtle ways. So, yeah, my pleasure, IBL. Newt Boy, you asked if I had ever played on a restored 19th century piano or a pianoforte. I have not had an opportunity to do that yet. All I know is just from talking with people who have played those instruments. And from what I've heard, yes, the action is incredibly light on those pianos. Yeah. The action's very light. The sustain is nowhere near as long as the modern piano. And the tonal color. An interesting thing. One more interesting thing. And we got to get to Rhodsey's example he sent in. But this is going to come out in a video on the channel soon. But when we talk about the unicorda pedal on a modern instrument, the left pedal, we know that the left pedal on a grand shifts the action, and it shifts the action so that the hammer either strikes the string in a different point on the hammer, or it eliminates one string. Yeah. And the una corda actually stems from the very first pianoforte that had a shift pedal, had only 2 strings per key. And so the una corda pedal shifted from playing 2 strings to 1 string. That's how it got its name. It's the 1-string pedal, it's una corda. But during piano development and across history, and Beethoven and Schumann, Schubert had instruments like this. Pianos were beginning to be strung with 3 strings across most of the instrument. And the hammers, the string spacing was much closer together than it is on the modern piano. And the hammers were narrower. And those pianos, there were some that could shift using the una corda pedal to play. You could play all 3 strings, or you could play 2 of the 3 strings, or you could play 1 of the 3 strings. We don't have any pianos today that can do that. That's a really interesting point in history, I think, because we cannot simulate striking a single string. And the purity of tone you can get, and it's just a totally different experience when a composer would write una corda, especially if it was like Beethoven, and they'd say to use una corda pedal. It doesn't happen very often. But when they say that, they're looking for a really, really, really particular sound that none of the modern instruments can actually produce. Just an interesting tidbit. C drive, yeah, you say you would love to get a Kawai GX2. The Kawai GX line is fantastic. Oh gosh, there are so many things that I love talking about in this area. Rhodsey, are you okay if we let your segment go for another 5 minutes? Bethany, you say your poor church piano is by the drafty door. Oh no. Oh, Nancy, you say don't buy a Spinet. That's your acoustic, and it's basically a bookshelf at this point. Yeah, a Spinet. You are much better off if you can. You are much better off having a digital than an acoustic if you have a Spinet, and if you can bypass the Spinet and get a true upright. It doesn't have to be super tall, but something a little bit bigger. The action will be much better. Bedlington Groomer said, can any digital pianos give a true una corda sound with the 3rd pedal? Not like what I just described, because it's never been sampled by anybody. That single string has never been sampled. Now, if you're also meaning, can a digital, do digitals really simulate like what an acoustic piano does today, a modern grand with the left pedal? I would say most digitals without a sample library do not. Most of them just trigger the same sound that you heard when you depress a key at a certain velocity. They trigger that sound quieter with a little less top end. So they EQ the brightness out a little bit. And it's just an estimation of what an una corda pedal does. Whereas the library that I mentioned earlier today, the Modern D, when you depress the left pedal, triggers an entirely new set of samples that were recorded on that piano with the una corda pedal fully depressed, eliminating one of the strings. And it makes a huge difference in the tone. So, in that case, yes, if you have a digital that's got that 3rd pedal, the onboard sound is just doing a basic representation of what it does. But if you get a good sample library, you can actually get a true representation of it. Okay, Rhodsey, you gave me the go ahead. So, since Kawai's GX2 was brought up, and I haven't mentioned this on the channel yet, this past weekend, I was again up at Steinway in Denver, and I was visiting to try out the new Boston line of pianos. And I didn't have to sign an NDA, so I don't think I'm going to get in trouble for saying this. But Steinway is just rolling out a new hammer design for the Boston pianos that is Steinway designed and Steinway made at the Renner factory in Germany. Steinway owns Renner now, if you didn't know that. So it's a Steinway designed hammer made at the Renner factory where the Hamburg Steinway hammers are made. Whereas the previous generations of Boston were a Kawai hammer designed by Steinway but built by Kawai with local materials. The difference in playability between the old Boston line and the new Boston, the Steinway dealer only had one of this new instrument in when I went to try them out on Saturday, is huge. It's incredible, actually. And the color, just the warmth and the choice of tonal colors you have at your fingertips with the new Boston hammer it's crazy good. They only had a 5'10" piano with the new hammers to try out. But the difference between that model and the previous generation was, it was like they were two different brands. It was like the previous generation Boston was a Yamaha and the new one was a Steinway. That's how dramatically different they sounded and felt to play. All that to say, personally, if you're shopping for an acoustic piano, I think the new Bostons outplay Kawai in every regard. For comparable size, and they're less money. It's kind of crazy. And even though this is a new part and it's, made in Germany, the price of Boston pianos has only increased a very, very tiny amount. It's like a couple $1,000s per instrument. It's not very much at all. And so, for example, I know Boston's biggest piano is a 7'1" model. And the MSRP on that instrument is $68,000. That's what they gave me at the showroom. $68,000. The MSRP on a Kawai GX6, which is also a 7-foot instrument, is $85,000. That's not even a Shiguru. It's not the handmade one. But it's significantly more money. And I think, at least based on that one piano I played, the Boston line is really holding its own. Really, really good instruments. So if you're shopping for a Kawai, give Boston a try. You might find you'll get an even nicer instrument and save some money. So we'll see how Kawai responds to that. I'm sure that they're going to do something to be competitive because the difference is just too big right now. Oh, anyway, thanks, Rhodsey, for giving me those 5 minutes. Yes, Newt Boy, Heart of the Keys, Anik has a Boston. It's a 7'1", but it's before this change because these new hammers are literally just rolling out of the factory. The very first piano just came to Steinway Denver a week ago with those. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where things go with that. Okay, Rhodsey, I've got your performance here. Rhodsey wrote a new waltz, and we're going to take a listen to the composition and a listen to a performance of it and have a little chat about that. All right, let me get that queued up. Alas, here we are, Rhodsey. Okay, here is Rhodsey's new waltz, Valse Petite. I think that's what you called it, right? Okay. Great. Let's give Rhodsey a little round of applause for that. Cool. Thanks, Rhodsey, for sending something in that you played. Very appreciated. My comments are going to be different because of that. So, great. No, don't apologize, Rhodsey. All good. Let's divide our talk into a little bit about composition, a little bit about the performance. Yeah? Hey, overall, I think this is a great step in a wonderful direction for you. I'm really glad to see you take something a little more simple and try to make something beautiful out of it instead of just lots and lots and lots and lots of notes. So that's great. Congratulations for doing that, first of all. I'm going to play through a little bit of it. Okay. Pretty neat theme. I like that. I like that you don't start with a root position chord in bar 1. Nice. I'm surprised by the harmony in bar 4 here. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay. My ear wants to go to E flat minor. And so when you allude to that with the downbeat, but then we actually get A flat in inversion, that's really cool. I like that. This bar, I think you have an opportunity there just to add the dominant 7. The open triad, I know we get dominant 7 on the 3rd beat. But we have such great chord voicings throughout the rest. Even there, it's unique. And here, that feels a little vanilla compared to the bars that you wrote previously. So I would consider, even if you just omitted the A in place of G flat for both of those, I think that would be a nice change there, especially because we are going back to repeat the theme. Or if you really didn't want the G flat on the bottom because you don't want that same pitch carried across, put the G flat on the top instead. But I'd consider not doing a 4-note chord. That would be too thick. See how that left hand gets really thick compared to. So at most 3 here, or I'd recommend that for that measure. Okay, let's keep going. Nice. Cool dissonance. Nice, dominant 7. Yeah, I think that's the best voicing for that chord in the final measure before the repeat. Let's keep going. Is that intended, Rhodsey? I don't remember from your performance. I don't feel like I heard anything that dissonant. D natural plus D flat. So, You did change this harmony a bit. Okay. So... I'm not sure what you did on the recording, but whatever you changed, I didn't notice that clash there. So we'll say it's good. So we were just talking about texture in the left hand. Let's see, you said it goes to D instead of D. Oh, okay. Oh, okay, so the left hand probably goes straight to B flat major. Good, I can get behind that. We were just talking about texture before in the left hand, and this feels very, very empty compared to the measures around it. So, there's one note that would be great to add to that chord. Rhodsey, what note do you think we should add to the C octave to help prevent, it's very open, literally open harmony. We have F and C and F and C. You say, you tried to use C to prepare the A flat. Prepare the A. I'm not sure where. Are you talking about A flat 2 bars later? The A flat section, which comes straight after. Da-dum. Oh, okay. The C itself is fine. But this still, if you were going to add a pitch to the chord, Rhodsey, without getting rid of anything, what note would be best to add to beats 2 and 3 of measure 21? By the way, anybody else, if you want to, feel free to chime in. Rhodsey, one of those two answers you gave, A flat or F, one is very good and one is very bad. Can you identify which one of them is the really bad one? Because that's the rule that we're trying to reinforce by talking about this. You say, so the A flat should be F. No, we're only talking about measure 21. Currently there is no A flat in measure 21. Bethany said A natural would sound nice there, too. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. It would. So, Rhodsey, what we don't want to do is continue to reinforce. Yeah, Rhodsey, what we don't want to do is continue to reinforce the root and the fifth. The root and the fifth are F and C. We already have F and C and F and C. We only have one note in that entire bar that is not the root or the fifth, and it's the G flat. So if you added an F, that doesn't fit the style of the composition. It sounds very ancient. Because it's still an open chord. It still does not have a quality. It does not have major or minor quality. Right? So the best note to add, Rhodsey, of the two you picked would be an A of one variety or another. There's A natural. That was Bethany's recommendation. Now we have a chord that's 3 notes thick, So the texture matches our previous bar. If you listen to that by itself, whereas if we only have the octave, that sounds like a really big difference, and we're not carrying the texture through. Yeah, now let's experiment with A flat. I don't love A flat personally. I like the A natural much more. It's more predictable, sure, but in the style you're writing, I think it should be. Right? So if we add A natural, so yeah, A natural, and Newt Boy, you said A natural first, yeah, not flat, natural. Da, da, da. And then we can keep going. And A natural, it still sets us up just fine for our tonicization of A flat that's coming up. So it's good. Now. Good. There you did it. You used A natural there, leading us back to a B flat with some dissonance. Flat 9 there. No, it's not flat 9. What in the world is that? It's like an augmented fifth. Or it's mode mixture of B flat and F dominant with the flat 9. Interesting. Interesting tone. Rhodsey, can we add some slurs here? Yeah, this section doesn't have any. Yeah, add some slurs. So you say I got a bit stuck in that part and you thought the C octave would prepare well for the 5-7 chord of the A flat part. Yeah, so going to E flat 7. So I think the trouble is, Rhodsey, that we don't hear the C. You keep talking about the C octave kind of alone and as its own thing. But when we hear it as a part of the harmony that you presented, which is F open. And F open, well, E flat is just a whole step down. So, Rhodsey, I would encourage you to, instead of maybe thinking about C as its own thing, remember everything in the bar. We hear everything in the bar as one harmony, unless you give us a new root in the middle of the bar, which we haven't gotten. So it's still F of some kind. Good. So anyway, we were talking about slurs. I would go back and add some slurs to this. Show us the articulation that you want. So, is this all one? Or do you want how do we want the releases to happen in there? Yep. Next phrase. That's a variation of it. Is it da-dum bum or da-da-dum? And is it da-dum da-da-da-da-dum bum? If we have slurs in there, then we really know how we're supposed to play that. And there's a lot of opportunity because of the style of the melody that you wrote. There's a lot of opportunity for you to say different things. All you know of them is score aesthetics. Rhodsey, let's talk about that. This will be great for everybody too. It's not often we get to add slurs to a piece of music. Okay. So you have a slur from D flat to C, which does give us a specific direction. What if we slur ba-dum, ba-da-da-da-dum, ba-dum? That will be one very unique articulation of the phrase. We drop and release and drop, release, drop, release, drop. Let me play that all without talking, right? That has a lot of character. What if we come up with a different set of articulation? I mean, what if you just play the basic thing of saying, oh, the whole thing's under one slur. Well, then it's one sung line from the beginning to the end, and that's very different than what we just drew in red. And can we come up with a third one? Sure. How about bum, 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 not that. So now the black is a third representation. I didn't do the end very well, but... So all three of those have a different way that we'd articulate them, right? Blue. All one just big overarching phrase. Black. Has a different character. Red, which follows your initial marking as well. That's also different. You say, funny enough, that melodic section was your original idea for a scherzando. Interesting. Yeah. So, yeah, for everybody that's here, we don't often get a chance to say, well, how should we phrase it? Usually the composer has given us some very specific marks about what should be done. And now we can see, just by looking at this, the way we execute physically and musically, the outcome of it is very different depending on what the articulations are. So, Rhodsey, I would encourage you to add some slurs. Go and review this when you have a chance and add some slurs depending on what you like. You say, is this a golden opportunity? Oh, I mean, it's a very cool thing to talk about, because usually we don't, as interpreters of the music, we usually have to be a little bit more in a box. We see what is given on the page and we have to show that. Yeah, and that's part of when we talk about, for example, like text scores. If you look at a great text and you look at some other editions, slurs are very often things that get moved and that they're changed, and they're all over the place. And we know in an text edition, the slurs that are given are what the composer wrote in the manuscript, or the best idea of what they wrote in the manuscript, if the manuscript doesn't exist anymore. Other editions, before this big push toward text started, not that long ago, maybe a few decades ago, other editions like Schirmer or Peters, for example, or others, Dover, you don't know who wrote the slurs. And very often it could be the editor's idea of where the slurs should go. And then it's not the composer's idea. If the editor was really good, like if you have a Czerny edition of Beethoven sonatas, that's going to be very interesting. And it's going to be very interesting to compare a Czerny edited Beethoven sonata to an text edition. In the text, you'll see Beethoven's actual marks. And in the Czerny edition, you'll get probably Beethoven's interpretive marks. They might be different. That would be a really cool thing to do a video on. Maybe I'll do that. I'll see if there's a difference and what those differences are and talk about them in Beethoven in particular. That's one example. So Czerny was a student of Beethoven. And when we have those opportunities where a student has become so prolific and they publish editions of a great composer's work, we're going to get other different insights. Right? If you noticed, when the Chopin competition was happening earlier this year in Florida, a lot of the competitors listed the edition they were playing from. So if you did look through the description of anything, you'll see, oh, it's such and such a Polonaise, and it's Paderewski, or it's Ekier. Usually those two. And that could be really important because the notes themselves on few occasions are actually different between the editions. And some of the other slurs and other markings are different between the two editions. And they're both authoritative editions of Chopin's work. Interesting. Anyway, Rhodsey, you can give us great help if you show some slurs, because the other implication as a composer is that if you've slurred part of a piece, like the top. By the way, now that we're talking about slurs, I disagree with what you wrote. Because of the rhythm, it naturally wants to be played. Maybe the last one. That feels natural just because of how the notes flow. Yep. But when you give us slurs, and then we get a section that doesn't have any, the implication is kind of that perhaps you mean detached. If we don't get anything. Johan says, from a singing point of view, add some portamentos and keep the slurs as Rhodsey wrote. Oh, interesting. Yeah. You're talking about the top line. Yeah. I could get behind that. Newt Boy, I don't actually have a video that's titled about slurs. The closest thing I have to it is my video on vertical wrist movement. That video and the concept of slurs are super related. But I could do a different video that specifically talks about slurs and the power behind the marking. Yeah. Rhodsey says you can only detach it if pedal marks are ignored. Which, yes, Rhodsey, that is true. A lot of times, pedal markings in this style get ignored anyway by a lot of pianists. Because even though Chopin wrote things in this style, and with this style of marking too, where you're showing a pedal and a release, pedal, release, pedal. There's a lot at play about whether that's truly the best choice. And in a lot of Chopin, even when Chopin wrote that, it doesn't work on the modern piano. And because a lot of performers are used to, when you see pedals with stars or asterisks for the release, whenever we see markings like that from a performer's perspective, very often we say, okay, every bar is supposed to get pedaled. But where your asterisks are placed, one, they're kind of all over the place. So if you really want them to be released, they need to be lined up with that note, kind of like they are here. And with that note, you see, they're all offset. That part of engraving, if you want them to be taken super seriously, that needs to be better. Because right now, it's very unclear where you mean the pedal to be lifted. So what we end up doing is saying, okay, every bar is supposed to be clean. And how I use the foot to accomplish that is going to change depending on what the melody does. Because there, in measure 21, no good pianist is going to play under one pedal, because that sounds really blurred. because of the shape of the melody, the pedal's always going to get lifted or partially lifted here, regardless of the marking, because we don't want to hear those two notes clash so badly. We want to continue to hear the melody, right? Let's keep going. We've gotten to measure 28. Rhodsey, I want to know, what does that mean? What is your intention behind this bar? 28, 29. Let's see. Yeah, Rhodsey, you said, okay, we're talking about measure 28. You said you kind of break the waltz. Yes, definitely. Okay, Rhodsey, you say a sudden, abrupt pause to the waltz and a kind of way to cadence back to B flat. Okay. Do you have, and you don't have to answer this right now, but if you have another deeper intention, see, because you leave the chromatic suspension on E to F. Da, 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 dum. Yeah. If you have a deeper emotional reason behind doing that, that's what I'd really want to know. Why is the waltz figure broken? What is it saying? What is the main theme about? What is it expressing? What is the second theme about? What is it expressing? How is it different from the main theme? Why is the main theme repeating and rocking back and forth? And why is the B theme mostly falling? And then in sequence, why does it do the same thing again? What really is it saying? And then what's happening here? And if we can cue into that, you said maybe the B flat minor section reflects how you felt mentally in the time you made it. Okay. Let's tie it in more to the piece as a whole. Just to put some words to it. The opening feels kind of wistful. It's almost like, okay, we're like running through a field or the meadow, and it's very pleasant and just very nice, right? And then this continues that feeling. Great. Now, how does it change? Because of your dynamic and the crescendo marked and the change in harmony, you can hear I'm injecting something very different emotionally into that. And here, it could be an echo. It certainly feels, because it's major, we're not going to continue to push through that. But then, what is this statement about? What is it trying to say? How is it different than us running through the meadow? Johan, you say almost a haunting quality on the falling melody. Yeah. So then, why did we leave to go to F minor? And why are we returning via A flat? And then when we get here, yeah, why? That interjection in measure 28 and 29 has something to do with, it must have something to do with what happens in measure 18. So this feeling or the change in scene goes right along with something similar. And then we repeat directly from that. The wolf is in the brush, Johann says. Yeah, could be that. It could be something internal. What is this, the character that is what we were portraying in this piece? What are they struggling with? And why do we move from such bliss and carefree, a feeling of carefreeness? Why does that change? Because what are they feeling? And then is this part of the internal conflict? Or is it something totally different? Is it a distraction? Yeah. So Rhodsey, that I want you to have a really clear idea of what you mean by those different things. Because if you know that, we can't always give a direction like that in the score. But we might be able to write some more markings here that really show us, and I know I keep holding on to that chord in the left hand. I like it when it's sustained with no pedal. But that's neat too. We might be able to get a different, more markings. Is this piumoso? And where are the slurs in that bar? What are the dynamics? Right? I'm injecting a lot of stuff that's not printed there. So I'm just encouraging you, if you can pinpoint the story and the emotion underneath, we can add more markings to help tell that story. Nancy, you say the dancers see the X across the ballroom. I love that. Yeah. Like in Pride and Prejudice. As the X enters the room. And then we get distracted talking to someone that's friendly. And then the X makes their way toward us. Love that. Newt Boy, you asked what notation software is my favorite for iPad. I don't really have a favorite for iPad. If I were to pick, I would pick Dorico just because of the compatibility onto a computer platform. But notation on iPad, generally it's a little clunky, especially compared to if you have a keyboard hooked up to a computer, just how fast you can write things. Yeah, Newt Boy, I used Finale for more than 20 years. And when they when they announced they were going to discontinue development and discontinue support for their software last year, I transitioned into using Dorico. Okay, Rhodsey. I can figure out the story, but I'd still want more markings. I still think you can show more detail in how you would like lines articulated. And you've also only given us a forte with a crescendo. So that implies we're at least forte to fortissimo in 22. And it doesn't change. So if I play only what's marked, oh, I'm not showing you the screen anyway. But if I play only what's marked, that doesn't have shape either. So, anyway, Rhodsey, show us more. You said the sforzando section. Interesting. Yes. Yeah. Da, da, dum, da, da, dum. I just have one question. And if it's what you intend, then great. But just to bring it up. This theme that we have a falling eighth note. Da-da-dum. You start that in measure 30. The great. Da-da-dum. Remember that in 3, the downbeat is the most important note and it gets a natural accent. So, da-da-dum. That means naturally the pianist should play da-da-dum, 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 where the emphasis is on the first. Yeah? And when I heard you play it, it seemed like the emphasis was on the half notes. And if that's the case, then it makes the eighth note sound like a pickup. Like 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. So, okay, you said I'm spot on. So then we just need to be sure when we play it that we make sure the half notes do not get an accent, like they are the point that we are going to, right? But they're pulling away from the downbeat. Okay, good. As long as that's what you intend, then fantastic. I like the variation here. Good, yeah. What about adding a retard at the end? So that we really truly wrap up. Instead of just being finished like that. Think about it. Yeah, good. Overall, Rhodsey, I know we talked about some details here, but I think this is a big success for you. So congratulations on that. There was one technical thing about your performance that I wanted to address. And that is your breaking of the joints. I know we've talked about it before. Your breaking of the joints at the bottom of the second finger, third finger, fourth finger, and they bend backwards as you play. And so sometimes when you're playing, it looks like you're pressing a key like a button and the fingers bent backwards. And we want to get that fixed because we should never be pressing a key like a button. The key should always be struck in some way, whether it's a gentle, tender way or a more aggressive way, right? But it's never pressed because as soon as that finger breaks like that, we lose a huge amount of control over our technique because we can't tell how much force we're putting through that knuckle that's kind of loose, floppy. So we want that to be nice and firm so that when you play softly, we know that note's going to come out. And when you play forte, we know that note's going to come out. Yeah? That's the only thing I wanted to mention technically. Jess, you say, please don't forget to hit the like button. Yes, please hit the thumbs up if you haven't already. Let's give Rhodsey another round of applause. This was a lot of good stuff to dive into. A lot of cool things, actually, compositionally, to talk about with everybody. And overall, I like the piece. I like what you did. Seth says, clap. Wonderful. Okay, great. This is perfect timing. We are going to wrap up. So we had a bit of a Q&A in the middle of stuff, I guess you could say. Oh, IB says you're going to play it now. Great. Rhodsey says, does that actually risk injury or just affect performance? That depends on how much you practice through that, we'll call it a broken part of the mechanism. How much do you practice through it and how much force do you put through it? And if you're putting considerable force through it for extended hours, it can lead to injury. And it could lead to a lot of soreness in that joint. And if you're not doing it, if you're not practicing that much where it will lead to that, well, you should practice more. And secondly, yeah, I mean, it feels a little bit like if we say, or just effect performance, that feels a little bit like it's diminishing the importance of that technique, because if you really want to have control over your playing, you can't have that buckle. Otherwise, everything is compromised. So if you want to show a great phrase and you don't want to have a note not speak on occasion, you can't have that problem. Because it almost, with that broken knuckle, it almost doesn't matter how much you practice, because we can't predict how much energy we're going to lose through the break. So because of that, it doesn't matter how much you practice, those inconsistencies will always be there. So, Sinden, you say you'd love to hear me improvise. So maybe sometime. We'll see. In the next month, I do have a very improvisatory arrangement coming out on my other channel. So you could stay tuned for that. It was kind of planned that how it was going to work, but I didn't do it with any music. I just played. So yeah, we could talk about that. We could talk about a little bit of improv sometime. Newt Boy, yes, my recording of On Eagle's Wings on my other channel, that was improvised from the hymn sheet. So I looked at the chords and stuff, but I played a lot of things that are not written down. Yeah. Rhodsey, you say your brain is behind whenever you perform and you think note by note, not phrase by phrase yet. Yeah. Yeah. That's a practice thing too. I think you spend a considerable amount of time composing, Rhodsey, and that's great. That's really great. And if you want to get more in front of your playing, it's not just more time practicing, but more time taking really small amounts and making sure we're thinking the right way about them. Thinking in sentences and not in letters. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'm just reading a couple more comments. Rhodsey, what you just said, you said you're a better composer and improviser than pianist playing set repertoire. That truly, I think that is just because you practice composing much more often. And that's great. Wonderful. Not bashing that at all. But if you did want to be a better pianist too, if you take some of that time that you spend doing a lot of composition and you put it into your practice, there'll be big improvements in that area too. Kale, my other channel is just my name, Charles Szczepanek, and I've got 100 to 200 videos of performances on that channel. Performances and arrangements and originals and all kinds of stuff. Okay, all that said, this has been a great session. We're going to wrap up today. And yeah, the next live stream, we're going to have a little bit of a break because we do the live streams on the 2nd and the 4th Wednesdays of the month. So the 2nd Wednesday of August is the 13th. So our next live stream will be on August 13th. So watch out for that. And there's always new stuff coming out on the channel these days. A short just posted this morning on pedaling. Another one posted Monday. And there's a new video coming out Friday. I'm trying to put 3 things out a week. So stay tuned for all of those. And check back in if you haven't checked in on the subscriptions tab or something. Check back in to see what has come out in the meantime. Yeah, Sinden, thanks for sending in your playing. It was great to work together. And thanks everybody for sticking around. I will see you hopefully in the comments or on the next live stream. All right, practice smarter, not harder, everybody. And I will see you. I'll see you when I see you.